Abaco, and this is Joy Jamz. And my guest today is Leslie Laws. Leslie, can you give them a wave and say
Hi,
hello?
folks. I'm so happy to be here in Cindy's space.
Yes. So today on Tremendous Tuesday, we're going to be talking about being your best self. And who doesn't need that? Who doesn't need some reinforcement and some ideas about how to be your best self? And I don't know who would be a better person to talk to us about that than Leslie Laws.
Oh,
So Leslie, I'm going to start out normally on this show. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but normally
sure,
on this show,
most of your sessions.
oh, that's awesome. Oh my gosh, that makes me
Absolutely.
feel so good. But normally on my show, I start out by doing a reading from A Course in Miracles. Are you a student of A Course in Miracles,
many,
Leslie?
many years. I've read the entire 3 books
Wow.
front to back 6 times.
Oh my gosh. So Leslie is a true Course in Miracles student, and I'm working at being a Course in Miracles student the way Leslie is. That's amazing.
It's a process, you never get it all, and you just
keep diving into it.
Yeah.
So, but today I thought there was something that came to me. It was something that was posted on my Instagram that I posted on my Instagram yesterday. And I was reading it and reflecting on how I had met Leslie. And I thought that this would be a great thing to read, to share with you, and to reinforce what Leslie's here to talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and read that to you, if you could just bear with me. And it's a quote by someone named L.R. Nost. And here's the quote. Life is amazing. And then it's awful. And then it's amazing again. And in between the amazing and the awful, it's ordinary and mundane and routine. Breathe in the amazing. Hold on through the awful. And relax and exhale during the ordinary. That's just living. Heartbreaking, soul healing, amazing, awful, ordinary life. And it's breathtakingly beautiful. So, what I really like about that, Leslie, and everybody, is this idea of accepting that life flows, that we can't have an expectation of everything being amazing all the time, and that we have to respect spirit, we have to respect our human body, we have to respect our energy flows, and that it's just natural and normal for bad things to happen, for good things to happen. It's all part of the process.
So true. So beautifully stated, too. I love that quotation. And I really think we can maybe just shut down this show right now, because if you get that, if your audience really got that, we would have done something fabulous for the world. But getting that is a hard thing to do.
Well, I think it's a lifelong thing.
It's just a practice, isn't it? Which I'm going to talk about a lot today, that whole concept of practice. But I think that one of the things that is sort of important to note about what the quotation is that it's our reaction to those ups and downs that really causes us to suffer. So I'll be mentioning a lot the 4 Noble Truths, that the first teaching of the Buddha was the 4 Noble Truths.
Yes.
And the first noble truth is life is suffering. Life is changing. Life is variable. Life goes up, life goes down. Just exactly what you said. And the second noble truth is the cause of that suffering is clinging and craving.
Oh.
It's that we want to hold on to the good times and resist and push away from those down times. But as you're suggesting here, that's just not the flow state that we are most productive and happy and joyful in. It's learning how to embrace both the ups and the downs. But that is a practice.
Well, speaking of that word practice, so I'm going to tell you all a little bit about how I met Leslie. And I'm actually rolling back through my brain, and I'm knowing that one of my colleagues, Heidi Bear, knew you and was friends with you. And I think she just told me about you.
Really?
And then I was doing a self-care group in my practice.
Yes.
And I feel like that was the first time we met.
I think it was.
When I invited you to come in and speak. And what you spoke about there was one of your initial sort of concepts that you were, was
Right.
a signature concept for you, which is the foundational practices,
Right.
which I'm going to let Leslie get into that. But what I'd like her to do to start with, because you're like, some of you may be like, Leslie, oh my God, it's Leslie. But some of you may be like, who is this Leslie lady?
Right.
And what's her story? And why is she here? And so, Leslie, can you give us a little sense of who you are, what you are, why you are, and how you are creating joy in the world? Just talk a little bit about that.
Oh gosh, yes. Now, as I told Cindy before, feel free to derail me anytime you need to, because I love setting the context for things. But I have been a teacher all of my life, since I was 5 years old, and tried to teach my little friends in the neighborhood how to identify rocks that I had collected from Colorado. My mother said she was a born teacher from right out of the womb. But so I've been a teacher, and for the last from 1989 until 2013, I was a professor at Rollins teaching creative writing and literature. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Had a fabulous experience there. All of my teaching I enjoyed so much. But in 2000, well, it was before 2013 when I officially retired from Rollins, I became anxious, and I use that word very consciously, anxious about the many conversations I was having with women in my age group, women of a certain age, who were miserable.
They just weren't happy.
And the word that kept coming up over and over and over was stuck. I just feel stuck. And I was, even as I was moving into retirement, I was energized. I was happy. I had a plan. And, but as I looked around at many, many women that I was coming into contact with, not so much my friends, but people I was coming into contact with, I said, there's a
gap.
An audience out
Yeah.
there. There's a gap. And there's so much research on how to help 18, 19, 20-year-olds transition from college into adult life. That's what I did my entire 45 years of teaching. But I found there was almost no research on how to help women or people in their 50s and 60s who know they have a long life ahead of them yet, but feel jammed in some way, or stuck, or not quite as productive, or not quite as creative. They lost their creative mojo. That was the way I was describing it. I thought these people have lost their sense about how to express themselves in their most creative capacities.
Could I ask you a question about that?
Yes.
So could that be like, in the way that you're saying that, they lost their connection to their spirit?
It's very much connected. I see creativity and spirit as two sides of the same coin.
Okay.
So in the work that I do now, I cannot do it without talking about spirituality.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible. I've come to that realization in psychotherapy as well.
Right.
That if we ignore that aspect, especially when we're dealing with anxiety and depression, then we're missing the whole gamut.
Absolutely. I'm 100% with you there.
Yeah.
So I created a business about 2 years before I actually retired, and it's called LifeArt Studio. And it's a coaching business. I don't call myself a life coach because...
What do you call yourself?
I call myself a creativity coach.
Creativity, okay.
Because what I'm really interested in doing is learning about creativity, learning what makes us creative, learning how we can recapture our creative impulses and our creative energy and foster it. Cultivate it, really develop it. That's what I decided I wanted to do.
Who doesn't need that?
Who doesn't need that?
I mean, who doesn't need that?
As it turns out, there are a lot of people out there that need that, because I've been very, very busy.
Yes.
So that started in about 2012, and it's 2018, and the business is still going. So for a teacher who never learned anything in her life about entrepreneurial feats. I've managed to keep my nose above water.
Yes, you have.
Yeah.
And you've done a lot of amazing things. I mean, you do a number of different things. You do groups, you do individual coaching, you do events, you've done retreats.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a number of things that you do, but most recently you've written a book, but we'll get to that. But I want you to just like tell us a little bit more about some of these, because you just, how long ago did you write the book?
The book. That's what I want to talk about. The Tia Journal.
This.
Oh, yes, the Tia Journal. So, okay, let me tell you about this.
Okay.
This requires a little bit of explanation, a little bit of background for you. So here I am coaching. I'm working, as Cindy said, I'm working with private clients. I work in groups. I do what I call purpose-driven events. And I can talk about that a little bit later if you want. And then I do retreats. I don't produce retreats, but I'm asked to teach at retreats.
Yeah, teach at retreats, right.
So that was going along beautifully. And as you said, the Foundational Practices Workshop is my signature workshop.
That is your signature thing.
It's the foundation of the protocol that I use. I have a 10-step protocol that I use with my clients. And the very first one is foundational practices. So I insist and I work with my clients to establish for themselves foundational practices. And a foundational practice is a practice that you do every single day.
Every single day.
Every single day that you know is going to allow you to perform at your very best the next day.
So it's really setting yourself up for success day by day by day.
Owning your day is what it's all about. Because until we get clear about what practices we need to be doing for our body, our mind, and our spirit, that really gives us full access to our intellect, to our wisdom, and to our creativity. Unless we figure out what practices give us that access, we're dead in the water. So that's one of the first things I ask a client is, how long do you sleep at night? How do you fuel yourself?
Yeah.
What are it's real, foundational practices are real basic practices, and as well as some more esoteric practices.
So can I ask you a question about that? Because like basically you're talking about the things that kind of nurture the body and nurture the spirit both.
Absolutely.
Like it's having a set of things that kind of like what I was reading earlier, right? Where it's so easy to get out of the flow and like get focused on the darker or more negative thoughts. But if you have a regular practice, then it keeps resetting you back to what's true.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's beautifully said. I'm going to bring you over to my house. She needs to be saying that to all of my clients. So one of the foundational practices, and there are a set of about 4 or 5 foundational practices that I used to go through a process to try to get clients to kind of come up with. Now I just say, okay, do you want to know what the core foundational practices are based on research? So one of the things I pride myself on in the work that I do is that everything that I offer my clients is based on research. Show me the data is my mantra.
It's not just some idea
it's not
you
just
have.
Some woo-woo,
right.
Feel good.
Well, that's the professor in you.
Self-help. That's the professor in me. So I've done my research. And one of the things that we know from high performers in a huge range of disciplines, whether you're talking about business or creativity or high performance athletics or child rearing or gardening or anything you want to think of, there are some things, there are some factors that come up over and over and over again. And would you like for me to tell you?
I would love to know what those are.
I'm giving away my secret sauce here. Okay, so the 4 are sleeping 8 hours a night. Sorry, folks.
Need to have the 8.
Need to have the 8.
So the 5 I got last night is not good.
Not gonna do it. Not gonna do it. You need to be hydrating and fueling yourself really well.
So
that's a huge arena for a lot of people that I deal with, because here's the thing. We know, this is like, I'm not telling the world anything new here, but crapola in, crapola out. Okay. So if you're not fueling yourself with the best nutrients that you possibly can, and that means food, liquid, and supplements.
Everything, all of it.
All of that combined. And we do a lot of work on that at LifeArt Studio. If you're not fueling this engine that you have with the best, then you're not going to get the best out of it.
Well, that makes perfect sense. It's just logical.
It's a no-brainer. So shouldn't even have to.
It's like high octane fuel or the fuel with a bunch of crap in it.
Exactly. Shouldn't even have to mention it. The third one also shouldn't even have to mention, but we do, is movement. Mindful movement is what I call it in my protocol. But with most people, in most of the research, it's called exercise.
Right.
Some kind of exercise has to happen every day. Some kind of movement.
Moving your body.
That in a multitude of ways opens you up physically, which then prepares you to be opened up mentally. And the fourth one then is a reflective practice.
Oh, a reflective practice.
So in most of the research, they just say meditation. I use the term reflective practice because I know from having worked with many clients that meditation is a fearful word to a lot of people. And a lot of people have a knee-jerk reaction against doing or learning about meditation, but some sort of reflective practice. Now, as a part of that reflective practice, often in the research, and I've read tons of books, biographies, autobiographies, research studies that have examined people who we would call high performers in their field. Often in that arena of reflective practice, the practice of gratitude comes up.
Ah, okay.
So I started very early on in my coaching practice requiring my clients to keep a gratitude journal. And I just said, this is part of the deal. You have to.
If you want to, they have to contract.
This is part of the contract.
Can I ask you a question about that? Because I think that's important. So if you want to be a client of mine, you have to be willing to do that, because basically if they're going to be successful, what you're saying is the research says this is something you must do.
Absolutely.
I mean, basically all four of the things you said. You must sleep, you must eat and fuel your body correctly, including the kind of water that you put in your body. Yeah. You must move, and then you have to have this reflective practice. It's just, it just has to happen. And so what you're basically saying to them, if you're going to give me your money to help you, I don't feel comfortable like saying that I can help you succeed unless you can do these things.
That is so important, Cindy, because one of the things I try to do is to make the distinction between being a therapist and being a coach. I am not a therapist, although I do play one in my living room. But I am not a therapist, so let's just get clear about that. A therapist, a coach, as opposed to a therapist, needs to see action.
Yes.
I need to see action. I need to see results, actually. And I set up the protocol in a way that if you do it, you will get results.
Okay, so can I ask you another question? Yeah. Because here's what as a therapist, right? Here's one of the things that that I have experienced, and maybe you've experienced this too in your practice, is, so somebody comes in, you have this conversation with them, and they're like, yeah, go, I can do it. And then they come back the next week, and you're like, well, so how'd that go? And it's like, well, and then we hear, what were some of the roadblocks? And so is that something you do? Do you help people examine the roadblocks?
That's the main thing.
Because maybe I'd be afraid to come back, because if you're telling me like I have to do these things and then I don't do them, am I going to feel like you're going to be like, let's understand this?
Well, so that's such a good point, because it's a huge challenge in coaching.
It's like changing.
I know it is in therapy too, because and I've had clients who have paid me a lot of money come to one session and then don't come back again. It's so disturbing. Well, because like, let's just be honest, okay? Because what you're presenting is the formula for success in life. And we know, we as humans, we have this fear that comes up, right? The ego comes up and tries to keep us safe. Absolutely.
And so our ego will start to talk to us and say things like, well, really, like, what does she know? Like, right? Like,
Right
so
off
she's
the
just
bat.
right away. The ego's like already,
Before they've started their engine of the car that's
yes,
sitting in my
they're
driveway.
already
They're
creating,
already creating reasons.
and we're not saying that that makes you bad.
No,
We're
it
saying
just
that
is.
makes you normal, and that
I do it too.
and what these foundational practices do is they start to get you more into the place of like hearing your spirit instead of your ego so much.
It's true, but there is a step in between
Okay.
that, and it's one that I've had to learn about and learn how to gently work around. And that is, if a client is having trouble doing the foundational practices, and we come up, I don't just give, foundational practices to them. They have to figure out what is doable for them.
Yeah.
And we take it in baby steps. But if they don't do it, if they come back and they haven't done it, then I, as a coach, have another task to do. And that is to get underneath the resistance. First of all, just to identify the resistance, and then to help us together get underneath. That's what coaching is all about.
Right.
Is let's get underneath. It's sort of like, your friend Kelly Milligan.
Yes.
The foundational medical profession. Functional medicine, they're interested in getting at the root cause of the problem, not just dealing with the symptoms. So if you come to me and you're overweight and you want to work on the eating, fueling part, I can't do that.
That's not what you're good at.
I can get underneath that, what's causing that, or I will try. I don't know that I can always do it. But anyway, that's what you have to do when you reach that roadblock, is to start saying, okay, what's the resistance? And I'll go back to the second noble truth: non-acceptance, resistance, and
so the first
judgment. Those are the three. Right. Those are the three things that keep us in that state of suffering. So it's judgment, non-acceptance, and resistance to what is.
Like, I don't want to know. Like, you're telling me the formula for how to be like healthy, happy, and better, but I don't want to know that, because that means I have to change. So I'm going to reject that, resist that, and do all of that.
So there's a whole set of things that you have to do to try to get underneath, to get at what the real the root cause of the problem is. And then we deal with that. In the meantime, the practice has to keep going. And this is where your introductory quotation is so perfect, because the practices can be hard.
Yes.
The practice can be hard. So sometimes you have to get up really early to get your practice in. I have a very, very well-established morning ritual that I do every single day.
No matter what.
365 days a year. No matter what, unless I'm like really sick or something.
Right.
But I knew I was going to have to be here earlier than I'm usually out of the house. So I got up an hour and a half earlier than I usually do, so that I could get my practices in before I came here.
Wow. Yeah. So would you mind sharing, like, what are the things that you do? Just because they're what you do. They're not what everybody has to do.
Not what everybody has to do, but it's really what really became the foundation. My practice became the foundation of the TIA method. So what I do every day is I get up, I meditate for about 20 minutes.
Okay. Very first thing.
My very first thing.
Right in your bed? In your bedroom?
Not in my bed. No, I have a meditation cushion in my bedroom. So I do about a 15-minute meditation there. Then I go downstairs and I make my bulletproof coffee.
Oh, yes.
I am a bulletproof babe. So I cannot exist without my bulletproof coffee.
Yeah, you got your collagen, you got your high octane oil,
brain octane oil.
Right.
Yeah, the whole thing. Grass-fed butter, unsalted. It's a good drink. And I take that into the living room where I have my journal. And I do my gratitudes first. So the TIA method was the method that I was using myself. I didn't call it at the time the TIA method, but this is what I did. The first thing I do is I thank the universe and everything else I can possibly think of that happened to me or that I observed the day before, and I write it down in my journal every single day. Doesn't have to be an essay, doesn't have to be a long drawn out thing, bullet list if you want, I just do dashes. I don't even do a bullet list. I just do.
Yeah. In fact,
write the item.
I'll show this a little so that people can see it, because it's
Thank. That's the first item in the journal. And I created the journal to be a template of what I was just doing sort of organically myself. The journal, the reason I wrote the introduction and the template was so I could give it to my clients and say, here, this is going to make this easier for you to do this. I'm sorry. I'm like, I should be talking to you.
No,
right?
that's okay. I think it's good to go back and forth. Yeah,
okay.
It's fine.
So that's the first thing I do. Should not be a long process. Should not take you like hours to do that. It should take you maybe 3 to 5 minutes to do that.
To do the thing.
If you're forcing yourself to come up with things you're thankful for, you know you're done. You just quit then.
Right.
If you listed 3 things, great. If you listed 300 things, great. Some days my thank section is relatively short, and other days it's way, way long.
Yeah.
So it's just, you just let it happen organically. The second part of the template, the sort of protocol, is intend. Oh, wait a minute. I'll just say that. What TS stands for: thank, intend, and ask. So the second part of my journal over the years has been to write my intentions.
Okay.
Now, when I say intentions, I'm talking about intentions of the way I want to be and the way I want to perform in my day.
Okay, just for that day.
Just for that day. So with my clients, I work on a mission statement, intentions, and goals, and then action steps. So that's what we do, though, for their bigger life, for their whole life. But the journal, the daily writing in your journal, should be for your day.
Yeah.
This is what I'm doing to own my day. This is what I'm doing to set myself up for the highest performance, the highest capacity to experience joy.
The highest capacity to experience joy. Yeah, that makes total sense.
The capacity to experience joy. Some of us have less access to that capacity than others. And that's what coaching is all about.
Yeah.
It's about giving you access to the wisdom, the intelligence, the creativity, and the intuition that are naturally a part of you.
So that brings up a question. So can I ask you, because you said some people have less access. Yeah. So then the first thing that my mind goes to, of course, as a therapist, is things like trauma. Absolutely. Right? So like people, and traumas that people maybe aren't even aware of.
Absolutely.
And micro traumas, macro traumas, like it could be something small or something big, but something that's a message that's resonating inside of them that says, well, you're just one of those people who, right? Exactly. Other people are happy. Your life is hard. And so that message that is a subconscious message. And so it's helping people identify that that's even going on in the background.
Absolutely.
That's like the fuzz in the background that prevents them from, and once it's identified, then it could be tackled.
Yes.
Okay.
That is it. Exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself. And that's a long process, as you know.
It doesn't happen overnight.
People become, most of us go through life defended. I put my arms up, defended. This is the way we're going through life, Don't talk to me, or don't challenge me, or don't tell me I'm wrong about that. It's like you can sort of gauge the degree to which you are ignoring aspects of your own wounding or your own trauma by the degree to which you are reactive in negative ways.
Okay, wait, let's say that again. Because what Leslie just identified and stated was something that like we all should just like have as an understanding. If you find yourself getting overly emotional about something, getting highly angry, highly upset, highly sad, there's a wound there that needs to be like looked at and worked with. Exactly. That's what you're saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And so again, it kind of goes back to another thing you said earlier, or maybe you said this before we started, but it's really important for therapists and coaches to help the client be very compassionate.
Right.
About that woundedness or that defensiveness.
No judgment.
No judgment about it. In fact, look at it as a gift. it's like, oh my gosh, that's wonderful that you caught yourself being defended about this conversation or about this topic, because now that's exactly where we're going to go. And my clients, especially in the groups, they'll go, somebody will say something and another person in their group will go, uh-oh, she's going to be on the hot seat now. Leslie's going to go after that.
But what's interesting is they start to identify it in each other.
Woo,
they can hear,
things,
and that's the benefit of doing the group coaching that you do.
So awesome. I've got people in my groups now that I mean, I should be paying them because they're so good at identifying triggers or reactive states. But truly, I think that's really worth repeating, that if you are finding yourself kind of in a constant state, what I call afflictive state, any afflictive condition, which would be anger or frustration or irritation or judgment or any afflictive emotional state, as opposed to the positive feeling states, what we want to do, what you and I are both, this is why we're so aligned in this way, is what we're trying to do is help people cultivate the lifestyle and the habits of mind that will attract to you and build in you those positive feeling states, because this is the way you lead a successful, happy, joyful life.
And that is right. That is like so true. So, I mean, I get so excited talking about this kind of thing because it's like what I'm always trying to communicate to people, and also the whole truth of like, it's all the truth, and it's all hard and it's difficult and challenging, which is why you need these practices.
Exactly. So we start small with small practices. So you can't meditate. That's okay. The TIA method is a pathway
to meditation,
toward a deeper reflective or even meditative practice. There are many ways, as the poet Rumi says, there are many ways to kneel and kiss the earth. So there are many paths to God. There are many practices that lead us to enlightenment. Not that we're there, but we're working in that direction, right? So that is really one of the major purposes of the TIA method, is to give clients a very doable, actionable process that will open them up, give them immediately more access to their positive feeling states, and push them away or make them less interested in maintaining the afflictive emotional states. It's really that, it's a matter of that movement from feeling annoyed to feeling, if not joyful, at least neutral.
So let me ask you a question about it, because you're saying like maintaining that afflictive state. So basically what that sounds like is that we get used to being in that state. Absolutely. And then we don't even notice that that's what we're doing.
We cultivate it. And one of the
we
ways
look for it
because it's addictive. So it's the cell phone, it's Facebook, it's alcohol, it's drugs, it's sex, it's
all those things.
All of those things that
unhealthy relationships
keep us revved up into that
afflictive
states.
Yeah. So all of these things that you're saying, everything kind of comes back around full circle, and like taking that time, and that we shouldn't be upset with ourselves if we hear the conversation between Cindy and Leslie and it makes sense, and we think, okay, I'm going to start my own 4 foundational practices. I'm going to start them today, and then tomorrow we're having a hard time. We shouldn't be upset with ourselves about that. We should be, I probably need somebody to walk with me on this path until I'm fully on it. It's sort of like if you're walking into a path in the darkness, because when you try something new, it's dark, then the person who you bring with you who has a little bit more experience becomes your light, and things become brighter and brighter as you do it more and more.
That's a beautiful metaphor. I love that. And that person can be a good friend, a therapist, a coach, a spiritual guide, good books. Are you immersing yourself in the highest? As I say over and over, going back to the Greeks, the good, the true, and the beautiful. Are you immersing yourself
Immersing
in the good, the true, and the beautiful? Bathe your mind, bathe your spirit, bathe your body in the best that life has to offer.
So that do you mind if I say something about that? The best of life has to offer.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it's probably over the last like 2 or 3 years, I've become more and more aware of how much good stuff is out there in terms of the podcasting world.
Oh my gosh.
There is
it's
so
overwhelming.
much richness and beauty. And so that's one of the practices that I do is I listen to podcasts.
I do too.
Because those podcasts keep me in that right mindset, and I hear things and a lot of it, like, let's be honest. So I will encourage people to like listen. I have a certain podcast that I highly recommend. One's called what's the wolf one? Oh gosh, I can't think of it now. Anyway, The Adult Chair is one of my favorite podcasts because it really helps us to understand our internalized child and our internalized adolescent and what it looks like to be, a full and true adult. The other one that I recommend the most, I'm going to let Leslie talk because I'm going to look it up on my podcast thing, but talk about some podcasts that you like.
Oh, I'm right with you, Cindy, on the podcast because in addition to the TIA method, which is thanking, intending, and asking, and we'll get to those last two elements in a little bit, is I do some sort of reading in that early morning practice, and it's usually a spiritual reading. It might be a self-help book, but usually it's a spiritual reading. Right now I'm immersed in the Wayne Dyer's book, Change Your Mind, Change Your Life.
Really?
It's his year-long practice of studying the Tao Te Ching. He spent a year reading and studying the Tao Te Ching, and so he presents the 81 verses of the Tao, and then he writes a short essay about it. And I'm doing a year. I'm in 6 months now into a year.
How interesting is that?
Tao Te Ching, and I'm reading 3 different translations of it. So that's been my morning spiritual study. But in addition to that, then as I get up and start going about my day, I have podcasts on all the time.
Right.
I have my certain favorite podcast that I listen to. I'm like, up to speed.
Yes.
On about 6 or 8 of them. It keeps me a little bit too busy listening to a podcast, but I'm with you. Did you find
I found it. It's called The One You Feed. The One You Feed. Yeah. But it's called The One You Feed, and it's about that we have 2 wolves inside of us. We have the good, it's a metaphor, right? A good wolf and a bad wolf, and it's the one you feed, which is, again, it's like all of these things that we're talking about, but the beauty of that particular podcast is the gentleman who runs it, whose name I can't think of at this moment. He's a former addict. And so he has this history of like feeling just depressed and suicidal and like life, and then realizing that if he adopted some practices, again, it's always it always comes back to that same thing. Right. You were talking at the beginning about high performers, people who overcome.
I want to say thank you for saying that, because I want to say something about practice, whether it's the TIA method or anything else. There are a lot, as Rumi says, there are many ways to kneel and kiss the earth. This is just one pathway to a gratitude practice or to a reflective practice. But I think it's important for us to note about practice. When I use the word practice, I'm using it in a deeper way than when we say like practice the piano, or I'm going to practice my free throw shots or something like that. In this sense, a practice is a deep devotional endeavor to honing your capacity to be the best that you can be, to view the world through the lens of the good, the true, and the beautiful, to view the world through the lens of joy. I have a friend who is always saying to me, run that through your joy filter, Leslie. Is it making you joyful? And that's right. It's a good mantra.
You might not want to do it if it's not going to make you joyful. If it's not
going to make you joyful, you may not want to do it. And so, but the point I want to make about practice that we're talking about, this kind of deep practice that we're talking about here, undertaking here, is that it accrues over time. So there are, it's hard to measure what a practice really does for you. What happens once you do your practice, once you establish your practice and you've done it for a while, maybe several months, you might just suddenly one day wake up and go, wow, I just feel consistently better.
Ah.
Isn't that amazing?
It's cumulative.
It's cumulative. So it's not like you're going to see one day you're going to be unhappy and the next day you're going to be happy because you did the TIA method.
Right.
It's over time. You begin to see things shifting. You begin to see less reactivity. You begin to see yourself more compassionate, more understanding. Here's another thing that happens from deep practice. People who are engaged in a deep practice begin to enjoy more synchronicity in their lives. Those little events. I've seen you talk about this on the show before.
Yes.
Where you read a lesson from Course in Miracles. There's a meme you put up on your Facebook page, and then your person you're in conversation with actually brings up, and all of a sudden these things sort of begin to speak to each other, to resonate with each other.
Right.
Well, this is what life is. This is what Csikszentmihalyi, who is the person who made this term flow state famous. He's the researcher from the University of Chicago. So that's what being in a state of flow is all about.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're floating along in a Zen-like state. It means you're experiencing life with more connectedness, with more
present, because that's the word that's resonating with me. Because like if I'm totally present, I'm not in my head with a backstory. I'm just there, and I'm in it.
That's good.
It's like you can feel it.
I can't believe we've been talking this long, and the word presence.
I know.
Come up. Sorry, folks. It's a really important word.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Being fully present.
Yeah.
And, doing the work that we do, right? Our job is to be fully present to others.
Exactly.
Because you can't really be a good coach or a good therapist if you don't have the skill set of like being in that moment with that person, and forget that there was, you can't be like thinking about the person before, and you can't be thinking about your life and what you're going to do after. You must be present. And that's a practice.
That's what a reflective practice builds into you. We don't quite know how it happens. We just know it is one of the results of doing a reflective practice, is that you have the capacity then to be in the moment, to be present to the person that you're in front of, or to the experience you're having, whether it's a positive experience or a negative experience. The task for us is to be present to it. And so, there's a lot of research that's been done on this notion of a morning practice. And it's called many things. The term I like a lot comes from Brandon Burchard. He talks about the golden 30 minutes of the day. And the golden 30 minutes of the day are the first 30 minutes that you're awake. And how you feed yourself, how you allow your mind to be open and spacious and receptive, to be calm, to be peaceful, to be willing to receive. All of these things can happen in the first 30 minutes. And again, you set yourself up. Then you close your journal and you go about your day. And you don't have to examine every single thing you're doing. Am I being a good person? Am I being a present person? Am I being my best self?
It just happens.
It just happens automatically as a result of those golden 30 minutes.
Right.
So I want to say just a little bit, if I may, because it connects with this, about the second part of the template, which is intend, that I in TIA. And in the intention section of the journal, I ask my clients and I myself put down what my intentions for the day are. And I divide the intentions into two types. The first is intentions of being, and the second is intentions of doing.
Oh.
By the way, everything that I'm saying here is beautifully and probably more articulately explained in the
book.
Introduction.
Yeah. Right.
Just read the introduction.
It explains it.
It explains everything. But the being side of us all is those feeling states that we want to have. What kind of person do I want to be in this day? I want to be open. I want to be spacious. I want to be calm. I want to be peaceful. I want to love. I want to care. I want to be present. Now I'm saying want. You don't do that when you write an intention. You say it present.
I will.
Tense.
I am.
No,
I am.
Not present tense. I am. I am calm. I am open. I am receptive. That's almost always the first line of my intentions. I am calm, open, and receptive.
Yeah.
So many times the being part of my intentions will come about because of something that I did the day before that was not the way I want to be.
So give me an example of that.
So if I gripe about an experience, or if I complain about a person, or if I get annoyed or judgy about something and catch myself in it, then the next day in my intentions, I'm going to ask for a being state, or I'm going to intend a being state that would be the opposite of that behavior that I did the day before.
Oh, so you don't beat yourself up for it. You don't tell yourself you're such a terrible person. You course correct.
Correct. Yes.
That's really important to hear, because that's another thing we hear a lot. I'm sure you hear the same thing from clients, like, well, I still am doing these things. I'm like, yes, because you're a human being.
Right. Exactly. That's so important. It seems like self-evident, but it's so important.
Yeah.
So that first part of my intending then has to do with states of being that I want to inhabit in the course of the day. The second part then is what I want to do. Now, I caution people about making this a to-do list. I don't want it to be a to-do list, but I do want you to recognize what kind of accomplishment you want to have in the day. So for instance, this morning, when I was doing my intentions, you were in my intentions, that Cindy and I have a glorious conversation, that our work resonates with each other, that we are of benefit and help to the listeners. So that's my doing. That's what I want to do today.
Yes.
And so, and I would go on through my day. I look at my calendar sometimes when I'm doing the intentions. I just say, okay, I've got a meeting with John at 2:00, and I know this will be a productive meeting. That will accomplish what we both want to, and I try to get as specific as I can. So I don't go into a whole lot of detail there, but just recognize, giving my consciousness a heads up. Okay, guys, we've got some work to do today, and here's the result I want to see in that. Important, and I make this point in the introduction. Once you make an intention, the metaphor I use with my clients is, think of a mailbox. You've got a letter. You drop that letter into the mailbox.
Oh, you have to actually.
You forget it.
Oh, you forget it.
You forget it. You don't worry about that letter.
Oh, I've got to make sure I do it.
Think the post office is going to get that to John or whoever you're sending the letter to, or the bill or whatever. No, when you put something in the mailbox, and this is what Philip Golubuk, who is my first teacher years and years ago, incredible teacher and philosopher. I learned everything that I know about intending from him. Philip Golubuk. And he said, once you make an intention, then you have to let it go. You have to release it. Don't fuss with it. Don't worry about it. Don't try to analyze it or micromanage it in the course of the day. Set your consciousness for success. Set your consciousness for the results that you want, and then it's kind of
trusting. It's like trusting, letting go, because you can't really be present if you're thinking about making sure that you're doing something exactly.
You would be a nervous wreck all day long.
Yeah, it would create a lot of anxiety, which might have something to do with why people have a lot of anxiety. Exactly. I mean, maybe there's something there. Yes. And so so we've done thanks, and we've done intend, and then the last one is ask.
Good. I want to say one quick thing more about the thank and intend before I go on to ask. Over a course of time, the beautiful thing about this journal is that they become, I'm trying to come up with a good visual image. I'm using a spiral right now, but the word I use is cyclical. So one of the things that happens, for instance, if I have a good experience with Cindy in this radio show, then guess what? Tomorrow in my thanks section of my journal, I'm going to say, oh my gosh, that was so much fun. She knows my work better than I know my work.
Not true.
What a great conversation. So I'm going to be thankful. So what we focus on is what we attract into our lives.
What we focus on is what we attract.
Yeah.
Oh.
How fabulous is that?
Yes.
So I want to focus on those good conversations, not the problem conversations that I have. And I may have some problem conversations, especially when I meet with John today. That was like a counter intention. I shouldn't have said that. But so I encourage people to go back and reread past weeks
yes.
of thanking and intending, because what you'll find is that your intentions will manifest and you didn't even know.
You didn't even know.
You didn't even remember that you had made an intention about that. And when they manifest, you better put that manifestation in your thank section the next day.
I get it.
The universe wants to know that you are grateful for that, so it can give
you more of it. Oh my gosh, this is so powerful.
It's
but
powerful.
But this thing that you're saying about like looking back and realizing the things that I've had the experience I've been doing. I remember I read Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within when I was like a young mother. And I remember writing down, the goals, the spiritual goals, anyway. And I will sometimes, I still have all that. I'll go back and I'll be like, oh my gosh, ding, ding, ding. And the thing that's important is I'm not looking at that going, I've got to make sure I do that. I'll just find it randomly and be like, oh, it's like that intention creates the outcome.
Absolutely.
And then that creates that sense of like gratefulness and gratitude.
Oh, that's so good. The intention creates the outcome. That seems self-evident, but that's important to remember because otherwise we're living by default.
Yes.
And if you have a lot of money and have a great education and came from a great family and don't have any childhood wounds and who
are these people?
Your life is probably going to be pretty good by default. But if you're like the rest of us that have had a pretty hard go of it off and on in the course of the last so many years, I'm trying not to say.
You're trying not to say your age?
Carr in Blumenthal says, stop telling people your age.
Oh, hilarious. Because I have that's a habit of mine.
Yeah, mine too. I lied about my age for so long.
Oh, you did?
I was very young.
How funny.
Lied up. Yeah. So anyway, now I've forgotten what was it?
So we were talking about the thanks, the thanks, the asking.
Oh, the intending.
So
when the intending manifests, then you're not living by default any longer. You're co-creating with spirit.
Oh.
Co-creating with spirit.
Okay, so let's break that down just like really quick because I think this is super important. So spirit is fueling us. Is that a fair way to say it? Yeah. And our body is the mode of expression. Our body is the mode of expression.
Right.
Spirit is fueling us. Our body is the mode of expression. And so if we are letting spirit know that we notice what it's presenting to us, that we are thankful for what is coming up, that we ask for what we need from spirit, we then follow through, then what starts to happen is we're in a partnership with spirit. It's like boom, boom. And that's how you get in that flow state that
Absolutely.
You were talking about. And that's why this journal is so important.
Thank you, Cindy.
I mean, it's so obvious.
Yeah. Well, I do want to say, thank you so much for saying that. But I do want to say in all immodesty that I say this when I do workshops and about the TIA method. I say, does the world need another gratitude journal? The answer to that question would be no. I mean,
there's a million.
Go to Barnes and Noble. I mean, there's like a whole wing in most bookstores now dedicated to journals and especially
which is a positive
journals,
thing.
Which is it's a very good thing. But let me just say this, that this is a different approach to gratitude because what I am doing is melding the practice of gratitude with the practice of intending. I'm saying these are two sides of the same coin, that there's a cyclical pattern that begins to become established in your journal and in your life as a result of these collaborating kinds of efforts or offerings that you're making to the universe. And by the way, for those of you that may not have a spiritual bent or may be a little bit uncomfortable with thinking about this in a spiritual framework, we can take it totally out of the realm of spirit and go into quantum physics, which I've been known to do. Although I just did a workshop at the Orlando Museum of Art on the TIA method, and one of my friends said, "Leslie, cut the quantum physics shit." Oh, sorry.
That's okay. No worries. That's fine.
Cut the quantum physics. People don't need to know that. They just need to know how to do the practice. But see, here's the interesting thing to me about this is now we know from research, quantum field theory, to be exact, is that we are like antennas that are energetically hooked up with the energy that flows through the entire universe and more. And it's a feedback loop.
Yeah.
So even quantum physics now, in addition to the great wisdom traditions of the whole species of the planet, who have been advocating gratitude, now quantum physicists are saying that what the energy that you put out is going to be shaped and zapped right back to you.
Yes.
It's an energy, and that's probably about as much as I can say about quantum physics.
Well, but what you're saying is for some people the spiritual aspect is uncomfortable, so then you can move it to science. You can just move it to science
and move it into what science. If you've read in this area at all, even just a tiny little bit, you know that the beauty of what's happening to us today in the intellectual world is that the sciences and the humanities are moving closer and closer together. The sciences and the spiritual aspect, spiritual world are moving closer together. That they are seeing that they have a lot more in common than they at one point thought they did. So
wow, that's wonderful.
Cool.
So there's this one thought that has resonated into my head and popped in a couple times, and so I think I want to make sure to say it. And again, it's one of these things that seems fairly obvious, but so it's sort of like if somebody decides to go to the gym and work out, and so they start to build muscle.
Right.
And they like the muscle. But if they don't continue that muscle goes away. And it's the same thing with a spiritual practice.
That's why I say
it's a muscle.
Every day. That's why a foundational practice is something you do every single day.
Yeah.
You know, Marianne Williamson, who is a teacher of
A Course in Miracles
that I used to follow, no longer because she's so political now that I can hardly stand to listen to her. But she was, in the early days of my studying the Course, she was very influential on me. And she talks about reading the Course and doing the workbook is a way of building your spiritual musculature.
Yes.
Just the way going to the gym is a way of building your physical musculature.
Yes. So I hear what you're saying about Marianne and on her Wednesday night things, but I do want to make sure, because I have recommended to a lot of people over this air that she now has on her website the workbook of A Course in Miracles. And so for a lot of people, like listening to somebody like reading it to them, but you also, because you get an email every day and it has her recording of the reading and then the text of the reading. I think it's like, for me, this is one of my foundational practices, is listening to her every morning, because it kind of like keeps me on track. And she's not putting any and there's nothing there but the Course in Miracles. She doesn't have any personal.
All you need, really. Right. That's really all you need. And you know what? That's a great segue to get into the ask section. I don't know how much time we have left here, but just so that we finish up the template, because one of the things that Marianne Williams teaches is, or that the Course in Miracles teaches, is if you've got a problem that you've been working on and you've been praying or you've been doing whatever your due diligence is to try to solve the problem or the issue, she says, and you see her in the talk she does, she says, well, do you need a miracle? And according to the Course in Miracles, the definition of a miracle is a shift in perception from fear
to love. Yeah.
So that's, a phrase I say over and over and over and over again. So
wait, let's just say it one more time. A miracle is a shift
in perception from fear to love.
So it's just about the way you're thinking about it.
That's what a miracle is.
That's a miracle.
In the way you think about that world that's out
and
there.
Then the way to make sure that you keep your mind in a place where it can make those shifts is by having a practice that keeps you in core. And that's what your book is really good and helpful for. I can't help it. I mean, it's just so natural for me to do.
That's what the ask section is pretty much like what she does when she says you need a miracle. So the way that section came about was a client of mine came back for a little tune-up session. I hadn't seen her in about 6 months, and she said, I'm just kind of stuck and this is not happening, and I've been intending. And I said, well, tell me about your practices. How are your practices going? She said, yeah, I'm doing my practices. It's just not working. Not that you're supposed to do practices to make things work, but anyway, that's what she said. And I said, well, okay, because I'm thinking, I'm not quite sure how to go with this particular situation. I said, have you asked for help?
Oh.
And she said, well, of course, Leslie, I'm here. I'm asking you for help. And I said, oh, honey, if I am your highest source of help, you are in big trouble. That's the problem right there. And I said, no, I mean your higher source, your higher power.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, God, spirit, unity,
whatever.
Consciousness, the universe, the creative impulse, name it by any name you want. There are many ways to kneel and kiss the earth, right? So name it by any name. Have you asked? And she said, well, no. And I said, well,
there you
that's
go.
What you're going to do.
Yeah.
You're going to ask for help in your journal
every day,
tomorrow, every day.
Right. And then you're going to start, and then it's going to start to show up as your gratitude, because the help is going to start to arrive, and you're going to notice it. And then you're going to be able to look back. And then when you come to Leslie 6 months later for another tune-up, Leslie's going to say, remember that section in the journal where we started asking, and then you told me that you started to have these gratitude reflections about how, go back and just read those.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So you become your own teacher then.
Which, by the way, is the benefit of having a relationship with a coach or a therapist, because they've been with you on the path and they remember when you forget, because it's our job to remember.
Yeah, that's so true.
It's our job to remember. So, and I think that's a beautiful story, because what it says is I think you're the same as me. My intention is not to like have people come to me and keep coming and keep coming. That is not. I want like I have this lively personality, and I like to meet all kinds of different people. So it's like I like to have a mix of people. There are some people who I love seeing, and I've been seeing for a very long time, and I love that, and I love to see their growth. But then there's other people who, like, they come in and we work through, they go off, and then, maybe they'll come back, like you said, in 6 months, and like we do a little tune up, and I remember because I have notes.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the beauty of all of that. So Leslie, would you like to just say anything else before we start to move into the close of the show? Anything about like how people can find you, what some of your next events are, like any of those things? Because I think that people would love to hear those things.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, you can find me at leslielaws.com. So you could check out my website. Right now I'm on hiatus as I often, I try twice a year to go on a retreat, a long retreat, to go into silence and meditation and a deep study and a deeper yoga practice. So that is what I'm doing this summer, and only Cindy could call me up out of that.
I mean, I'm like, wow.
Yeah. So here I am in the real world talking about LifeArt Studio stuff. So LifeArt Studio is officially on hiatus until September, when we will come back with a brand new website that is being worked on as we speak. I'm so excited about it. And a brand new set of offerings and a little bit of a shift in who Leslie Laws is. There's a little bit of an identity crisis going on in my life right now. So
you're going to like bring that into
so
the...
I am coming back as a slightly different kind of with a slightly different kind of offerings.
Cool.
Than what I've done in the past, but still really advocating and promoting this TIA method as much as I possibly can. So it's available on Amazon, and it's also available on my website. And beginning in September, I will be doing a series of workshops around on the TIA method. So well,
we'll have to have you back then.
Oh yeah,
so that you can talk about it and really promote that, because obviously this whole conversation today has been about the importance of having these practices. And here's a method for doing it.
And by the way, let me just repeat, it's just one method. It's not
absolutely. And it's available on Amazon. So if I was going to go into the search bar in Amazon, what would I type in?
Well, you could type in me, Leslie Laws.
Okay.
Or you could type in TIA method.
TIA
journal.
method. TIA journal.
Capital T, capital I, capital A.
Okay.
TIA.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to now read, and I just want to say thank you again, Leslie. I mean, this has been like fantastic. So I'm going to read from the Book of Awakenings by Mark Nepo. I just always love how what the reading seems to somehow go with what we're talking about. And so for June 26th, it's the gift of prayer. Prayer is not asking. It is a longing of the soul. It is admission of one's weakness. And so it is better in prayer to have a heart without words than words without a heart. And that's a quote from Gandhi. And so here's what Mark Nepo has to say about the gift of prayer. This great spiritual teacher, Gandhi, reminds us that prayer of the deepest kind is more a pledge of gratitude for what has already been received than a request or a plea for something not yet experienced. Such an effort refreshes the soul. Implicit in Gandhi's instruction is the need to surrender to our lives here on earth. By admitting our weaknesses, we lay down all the masks we show the world. As we do so, what is holy floods in. I once saw a blind man rocking endlessly in the sun, an unstoppable smile on his face. Not a word was uttered. To me, he was a priest, a shaman, and his whole being was praying and shouting in silence that day, beyond his blindness, was happily enough. This is what the heart knows beyond all words. If we can find a way to listen, that beyond our small sense of things, a magnificent light surrounds us, more than anyone could ask for. That is what prayer as gratitude can open us to. So this whole writing, right, is about prayer as gratitude.
That's synchronicity.
That is synchronicity. That's what we talked about earlier. And so what Mark Nepo has suggested, if you're trying to like get into this flow of the gift of prayer and gratitude, is center yourself. And as you breathe, close your eyes and cease all asking. Simply breathe with gratitude for the air. Relax and feel your frailties and imperfections. And let the simple air fill them. Breathe deeply and slowly. And from your tender, imperfect insides, ask for nothing and give nothing. Just feel without words for your soul's place in the fabric of things. And so I think, again, like, so Leslie did, she talked earlier about synchronicity, and that right there is such a beautiful example of synchronicity, because what that is talking about, what Mark Nepo was talking about there, is completely about having some way of staying in the flow of gratitude, so that you can stay in the flow of spirit. And without that, some kind of practice like that, that can't happen. So lovely. So we're gonna pull a card from this deck. It's a Miracles Now deck. It's by Gabby Bernstein. And so I love Gabby Bernstein. Gabby Bernstein is also a teacher of A Course in Miracles, like Marianne Williamson. She's somebody who helps to communicate the ideas of A Course in Miracles to people. And so I'm going to have Leslie pull one of these cards, and we'll see what's in store for everybody today. So go ahead and show it to the camera.
Oh.
What does that say, Leslie?
I begin my day with love.
Oh, well, there we go. See?
That's an intention.
That's an intention. That's an intention.
Powerful one.
That's a powerful intention. And the very last thing we're going to do is we're going to do our mudra for the day. Now, this one I pick. So this is not part of synchronicity. I actually pull out the one that I think would be a good one to do on the day based on the guests that I'm having. But before I do that, I just want to remind everybody or tell everybody the lineup for the rest of the week. Tomorrow, I have my friend Devinder Singh Mohan. Leslie knows Devinder.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Devinder's a great guy. Devinder is very involved. Obviously, he's a fashion designer, and he has a store on Park Avenue in Winter Park. But more than that, or as much as that, he's also very much involved in Amnesty International. He's very, very active in, talking about what's right in the world. And so we're going to have a conversation tomorrow about just a little bit about his thoughts and feelings, my thoughts and feelings about the world, life, all of that. And we may even touch on suicide tomorrow in our conversation, because that's been something that's been, present. And, with a couple creative people, I've been on vacation, but, these things happened while I was gone. And it's something that he and I are both interested in, talking a little bit about as well. So, so that's tomorrow. And so I just probably convinced everybody to not tune in, because you're I don't want it's going to be a little bit of the conversation if we get to it, but we may get to it. And then on Thursday, I have Kelly Milligan. Kelly is coming back, and yeah. Kelly, you saw on the show that I had, the two functional medicine doctors, and Kelly, who's a naturopath. And we're going to talk about the role of cannabis in healing the body. And she is an expert on that. You see how Leslie submerges herself into deeply understanding everything about, how to be happy, how to be healthy, spiritual practice and things to do. She does the research. Well, Kelly does the research in this other arena. And so that's part of what I love to do here, is bring in people who are deeply experts on things, who've put in the time and the energy and effort to really understand these concepts and have a good method of communicating it. Because there's a lot of people who know a lot, but have more of a difficult time communicating. And I think having the gift, which you do, having the gift of being a really good communicator is imperative in that. And having this presence. You have a wonderful presence.
Thank you, Cindy.
So that's next week, or that's tomorrow and Thursday. So we are going to do the mudra, and Leslie and I are going to both do it as I read it. And this is called the Tarjani mudra, which is a gesture of the index finger. And the core quality of this mudra is opening the heart. And so I'm going to read from the back the instructions for how to do it. And since I'm holding it, can you show the camera what you're doing? It says, hold your palms in the front of your solar plexus and gently press the tips of the index fingers together, allowing the other fingers to relax inward. So they just kind of relax inward. Exactly. Release the shoulders and back down with the elbows held slightly away from the body, the forearms parallel to the earth, and the spine naturally aligned. So as you're doing this, And by the way, this mudra is especially helpful for opening the subtle heart, releasing constriction from the chest, expanding breath capacity, enhancing enthusiasm, which may be helpful for depression. So as you hold that, and with the core quality being the open heart, here's the mudra. Okay? So the mudra is attuned to my heart's inner symphony. I'm going to say that again. Attuned to my heart's inner symphony, I live with joy and vitality. Attuned to my heart's inner symphony, I live with joy and vitality. Okay. Well, I think that's a nice way to end the day. But I do want to ask you a question, because I know you're a yogi. Leslie's a yoga instructor as well. Do you work with mudras at all?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I was just thinking as you did that, I thought, boy, what a great session on practices, because your audience has been introduced to, a poet. I don't know what you call Gabrielle Bernstein as a
teacher,
a teacher, to an ancient practice of, using mudras. I mean, and the Tia method.
And the Tia method.
Like pretty good company here, I think.
Yeah.
But I think that's what I was thinking was, I thought this could be a practice.
Yeah.
Just doing that, pulling a card and doing a mudra.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's the point is, so somebody like you, well, Leslie's like me. I'm just going to say one more thing and then we'll end. Leslie, she's an overachiever, right? And so what we don't want to do is measure ourselves against, like, when I talk to clients, and I think you're probably the same way, I might tell them what I do. Well, these are the things that I do. But what you have to find is what works for you.
Absolutely.
And what works for you, I may have 7 things that I feel like I need to do, but you may just need 1.
There's no right or wrong. There's no magic number. It
Yes.
may be one thing. If Master Eckhart said, if the only prayer you ever make is thank you, that is enough.
That is enough.
So you put your feet on the ground as you get out of bed and you say thank you, and you've done your foundational practice.
There you go. Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you, Cindy.
Everyone have a fantastic day.